and gentlemen, members of the media, special good afternoon to my colleagues in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honourable Senator Dr. Amy Brown, leader of the opposition business in the Senate, as well as Member of Parliament for the constituency of Diego Martin West, the Honourable Hans Devines. Let me first start by indicating to members of the population that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is currently engaged in some discussions at the United Nations General Assembly, and Dr. Brown, in his contribution, in not too long from now, will give some further information on her presence at the United Nations General Assembly being held at this point in time. So welcome to the opposition's weekly press conference, and today we hope to address some key matters of national importance and to expose ourselves to examination by members of the media, hopefully that we can provide information for the education of members of the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to start by recognizing the 114th anniversary of the birth of our founding father, Dr. Eric Williams, the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and the founder of the People's National Movement. I want to recognize his contribution to national development in Trinidad and Tobago, for the work that he has done in establishing the first political party in Trinidad and Tobago, and for what he has done in the entire region. Today gives us a perfect opportunity to thank the Honourable Dr. Eric Eustace Williams for his major contribution to national development in Trinidad and Tobago and the region. And despite recent attempts by some of our colleagues opposite to rewrite history, to rewrite the historical record on the work of Dr. Eric Williams, we want to make it abundantly clear that despite our political differences, because political differences we will always have that, but we cannot entertain persons who, because of their narrow, self-seeking political agenda, try and make despicable attempts to rewrite the history of Dr. Eric Williams in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. As the opposition chief whip, as the chairman of the People's National Movement that was founded by Dr. Eric Williams, I am a product of his policies and programs for national development in Trinidad and Tobago. And I am certain that Dr. Amy Brown and MP Hans Devines can give their own personal testimony as to how we rose up and we made use of the policies and programs of the People's National Movement over the years to where we are at this point in time. And personally, I want to say that I am grateful for the policies and the programs of the People's National Movement. It is what contributed to my education as a young man growing up in a rural community with a single parent in Paramin, Maraval. And I was able to educate myself and make use of the programs of the People's National Movement to where I am today, being qualified as an attorney at law, being elected as a member of parliament to represent the constituency of Aruca Lopino and before Lopino Bonia West, being appointed chief whip in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as chairman of the People's National Movement. That is just my story. And so many of us have stories that we can share, personal testimony. And we can only attribute that to visionary leaders who give their life to contribute to national development. And when today persons are engaged in activities because of their own narrow political agenda to try to rewrite history, we consider that to be unfortunate. And we let our colleagues on the opposite side know that despite our political differences, these are matters that we ought not to litigate. Because when we do so, we create more disharmony in Trinidad and Tobago. And this ought not to be tolerated. It started by one Kirk Megu, and I saw in a recent missive issued by the Honorable Prime Minister, she's now attempting to double down on this unfortunate behavior by the PRO of the United National Congress. We are very proud of the work of Dr. Eric Williams. We are proud what he has done for the People's National Movement and to national development, as well as regional integration. The second issue I propose to raise at this news conference is a very sensitive matter, and one that I have to thread carefully as I seek to account to you, members of the media, and to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago on the work that we continue to do as the main opposition party in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. There are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that, according to tradition, we will not put forward to the national community. But I will start by saying that one of the roles, or the main role and function of any opposition party in a functioning democracy, is to hold the government to account. It is our constitutional responsibility. Even if it is 13 of us, if it is 3 of us, if it is 20 of us, the main opposition party in a functioning democracy is to hold the government to account. Because the opposition, at the end of the day, is the alternative government, especially in Trinidad and Tobago. And how do we do that? The standing orders of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago creates avenues for the opposition to hold the government to account. The standing orders provide for the filing of questions that must be answered on notice, questions that require written responses of the government, motions on the adjournment, motions for private members' day, and of course we have Prime Minister's question, where the opposition is given the opportunity to ask questions in the national interest. When the standing orders of the Parliament was amended, I believe was somewhere around 2012, 2013, the Standing Orders Committee introduced a new standing order to allow for the opposition to ask questions of the Prime Minister once every month, Prime Minister's question time. It gives the opposition an opportunity to ask the Prime Minister questions relating to any aspect of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. Very simple. And since this standing order has been introduced in the standing orders of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, you members of the media would have recognized, and members of the public observing parliamentary proceedings would observe that the opposition, at least 1 hour, as per the standing order, would file questions before the sitting of the Parliament, and the Prime Minister must come, and the Prime Minister must be prepared to answer those very important questions asked and filed by the opposition. What normally happens is that you provide for supplemental questions. And since this standing order has been introduced, all prime ministers in the past in answering those questions would subject themselves to supplementary questions that may flow based on the responses of the Prime Minister. I sat in the Parliament since 2020, and I observed the former Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, dutifully attending Parliament, especially on Prime Minister's question time, and answering all questions filed by the opposition, as well as all supplementary questions flowing from the responses that he would have provided. I witnessed it. So therefore, before and even before 2020, between the period 2015 and 2020, it has been the tradition of our Republican Parliament for questions to be filed, questions to be answered by the Prime Minister, and supplementary questions to follow. And those supplementary questions, as you know, will flow based on responses by the Prime Minister. So over the last 10 years or 15 years, it has been an established practice for questions to be posed to the Prime Minister and for supplementary questions to be asked of the Prime Minister so that he or she can answer on the floor of Parliament. Unfortunately, last week we observed that the opposition was unfortunately denied the opportunity to ask supplementary questions of the Prime Minister based on a ruling. We were taken by surprise because the answers provided by the Honorable Prime Minister warranted and demanded further scrutiny and examination by the elected opposition. And unfortunately, the opposition was denied the opportunity based on the Speaker's understanding, as he ruled, of the standing orders. There's another dimension to this particular issue. And oftentimes, these things are not known by members of the public. The opposition, in accordance with established practice, will submit questions to the Speaker, and the Speaker either approve or disapprove of the questions. And therefore, questions that you may see the opposition being allowed to ask in the Parliament may not necessarily be all of the questions submitted by the opposition. But I believe it is very important for the national population to have an understanding of what we continue to do in the discharge of our constitutional duties in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to bring to the population's attention the list of some of the questions that the opposition submitted to be answered under Prime Minister's question and what was eventually approved. The Member of Parliament for Arima, the Honourable Opposition Leader, asked the following question. With respect to the reported threats made against cabinet ministers, can the Prime Minister state what official reports, if any, have been lodged with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service? Not approved. Member of Parliament for Arima, the Honourable Penny Beckles, Leader of the Opposition. Next question. Can the Prime Minister state how many footballers have been targeted for national team selection pending proclamation of the recently passed Constitutional Amendment Bill ahead of the October the 14th March versus Curaçao? Not allowed. Member of Parliament for Arima. In light of the increased diplomatic tensions between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, which affect national security and regional stability, could the Prime Minister state what steps are being taken by the Prime Minister to de-escalate the situation? And you can perhaps check to see whether or not those questions were asked in the Parliament. The Leader of the Opposition again, does the government of Trinidad and Tobago recognize Nicolas Maduro as the president of Venezuela. A question from the Member of Parliament for Port-au-Spain North, St. Anne's West. Would the Prime Minister advise how many persons have been detained via detention orders? Well, of course, this one was approved. The Member of Parliament for Aruca Lopino, the Honorable Marvin Gonzales, asks the following question. In light of media reports that $1 million worth of narcotics have disappeared from the Barataria police station, can the Prime Minister state what security measures have been implemented to prevent the disappearance of the narcotics and other court evidence related material in police stations across the country, and whether any investigation is being conducted into the said disappearance? And 3, whether any TTPS officers have been transferred from the Barataria police station? Not allowed. The Member of Parliament for Diego Martin Northeast, in light of the mysterious and unfortunate death of 8-year-old Jisha Francois at the San Fernando Teaching Hospital last month, and the instruction for an urgent investigation by the Prime Minister, can the Prime Minister confirm whether the said investigation has been completed and a report submitted to her on the matter? What was the conclusion of the report regarding the cause of death by Jasper Francois? And 3, what action her government has taken in light of the conclusion of the investigation to protect the integrity of the public health system in Trinidad and Tobago? The Member of Parliament for Diego Martin Central, Simon Di Nobrega, can the Prime Minister state what social safety initiatives, programs and measures have been specifically put in place to protect the welfare and support for the families of recently terminated CPEP, URP, and reforestation workers and their dependents? The Member of Parliament for St. Anne's East, Dr. Nayan Gasbidoli, could the Prime Minister indicate the number of persons that applied for book grants 2025, the number of eligible applicants, the total value of books, book grants distributed to date for the current academic year, the total number of students who receive grants, and the eligibility criteria used for the grants? The Member of Parliament for Port-au-Spain North, St. Anne's West, the Honorable Stuart Young, in light of the serious and definitive statement of the Minister in the Ministry of Housing, Philip Alexander, that India will deploy a nuclear attack on the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, would the Prime Minister inform this House whether the government of Trinidad and Tobago has requested the Indian government to deploy a nuclear attack as indicated by her said government minister? Ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the questions posed to the Honorable Prime Minister on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago on serious matters of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. We believe that in order for any democracy to function and for any parliament to function effectively, the standing orders of the parliament must be interpreted in accordance with the practice and the established practice of this parliament. And as we have allowed supplemental questions to be asked of the Prime Minister in the past, and they have dutifully discharged those functions, as Opposition Chief Whip, I will work and I will give the commitment of the People's National Movement, the leader of the opposition, and the official opposition in Trinidad and Tobago, that I will do whatever I can to work with my colleagues opposite and all presiding officers to ensure that the standing orders of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago are used to promote and to advance democracy and to hold the elected government to account. And when the standing orders are interpreted or used in such a manner that can allow one to believe that the opposition is being undermined to discharge its functions, its constitutional functions, it does not augur well for democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. And it should concern all of us. All of us. And I want to give the assurance to all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that as an elected opposition, we will continue to do what we can within the confines of our constitution and the standing orders to hold the government to account on serious matters of national importance. The last issue I intend to briefly raise is the alleged visiting of known gang leaders by a sitting government minister that has occupied some media attention over the last couple of days. And a statement issued by the People's National Movement asking for the Prime Minister to launch an investigation into whether or not the Honorable Minister of Homeland Security received the appropriate authorization by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service for the Minister of Homeland Security, who before, in his capacity as a senior officer in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, to visit certain prisoners at the maximum security prison. Whether such visits were authorized at the highest level in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as per the standing orders of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, that is, whether the Commissioner of Police authorized such visit when the Honorable Minister of Homeland Security was a serving member of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and whether such visits continued after the minister was elected as a member of Parliament for the constituency of Tunapuna, and when he served and continued to serve as the Minister of Homeland Security, whether such visits continued. And therefore, the opposition reiterates its call for a full and thorough investigation as to whether or not those visits were authorized by the Commissioner of Police as well as the Commissioner of Prisons, and whether those visits occurred before and after the Honorable Minister was elected as a Member of Parliament and appointed as a minister in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll ask Senator Dr. Amy Brown to come and address you on some other critical matters.